Move up. Look at this place. 50,000 people used to live in the city. Now it's...
Why you always kick me when I'm high?
The first-person shooter is among the genres most synonymous with the phrase video game. Ever since its inception at the hands of Id Akimbo Johns back in 1792, the seemingly inexhaustible catharsis of pointing at a guy and watching him fall over perseveres as a staple developmental framework throughout the industry. And for good reason, I think, considering you don't get many gameplay loops as refined as shoot and don't get shot. From Doom to GoldenEye to Half-Life, there's virtually never been a time during the genre's existence when it hasn't been a breeding ground for AAA success and fat stacks of Benjamins. I say this to counter the notion that I am implicitly biased against FPS. I've shat on the genre in the past, but I won't deny it its fair dues. I'm reasonably confident that the FPS boom of the mid-90s was pivotal to the transitioning of video games from menial time killers to a legitimate art form. And yes, video games are art. Even if, looking at the current gaming landscape, that feels like claiming kissing pranks or scat porn are also valid art forms, and in that way I do somewhat respect the first-person shooter. Though I hasten to add that respect needn't necessarily indicate affection. I respect the surgical pioneers of the 19th century, but the bodies they worked on were no less snatched. In this analogy, I'm likening the desecration of graves and cadavers to my disappointment with certain video games. Welcome to the fucking show. What I'm getting at is, I'm no lover of dedicated first-person shooters. That core loop is, as I've said, a very sturdy foundation for a game. But if you don't build anything upon a foundation, all you end up with is a big muddy hole full of hypodermic needles and wasted potential. Some of my favorite games are first-person and involve the use of personal defense solutions, but use this as a platform to expand mechanically and define themselves. Hell, what might as well be my favorite shooter of all time, Fallout New Vegas, has some of the most static paper-mache gunplay you'll ever see, on an engine fashioned from Pringles and sharp little pieces of Todd Howard's 5'3" soul. But it more than makes up for it in the depth of the story, characters, and role-playing elements structured around it. Maybe I'm an auteurist prick. I am an auteurist prick, and with rare exception, clicking on heads will never be enough to distinguish a game for me, no matter how viscerally satisfying said head clicking may be. Let us then consider this a pilgrimage to the estranged land of up-close boomsticks, where thine cup overfloweth with energy drink, and there are no doctors, for there is no wound that cannot be healed by 30 seconds face down in some muddy foundations. And who better to guide us through this mecca of killstreaks and mothers being fucked than the Crown Prince Modern Warfare? I can think of a couple. Modern military shooters have never failed to bore my tits clean off. With their frat bro keg stand take on world politics, and their lack of any meaningful progression beyond eradicating the next wave of under-equipped foreigners, these games used to epitomize everything wrong with the industry. Used to. Anyway, COD 4 is, as you'd imagine, the fourth Call of Juarez game, and is generally attributed with kickstarting its own festering little subgenre. And I, your most cultured and charismatic critic, had never managed to play it. Releasing in 2007, it was an immediate and large-scale success, having a lasting impact not only on shooters but on AAA action gaming as a whole. The CODs I'm familiar with, more out of peer pressure than desire, were Modern Warfare 2, 3 and Black Ops 2. I remember them as flashy but ultimately vapid puffs of gunsmoke, not exactly getting me revved up for their common ancestor. But then again, a lethal injection of adrenaline and a swordfish style motivation job couldn't get me hyped up for fucking anything these days. We begin, as most Call of Cthulhu's do, with some faintly patronizing weapons training and an obstacle course.
Using your knife is even faster than switching to your pistol. Knife the watermelon.
You spawn in as Soap McTavish, an SAS recruit under a Captain Price. My time on the obstacle course indicated that I had all the skills of a drunk thalidomide victim, so naturally I chose the most masculine sounding difficulty level in retort. This leads promptly into the first full-fledged mission, an assault on some tanker ship. Right off the bat, you're handed the strongest weapon in the game. anything with a silencer. I swear to God, these things must have been handcrafted by Celebrimbor himself, because slipping one of these tubular shits onto a firearm transforms you into the human embodiment of sudden adult death syndrome. Something I didn't notice until I watched it back was that the obstacle course quite neatly outlines your path of attack through the ship. Despite your OP legendary equip, the Russian guards catch on and engage you as you descend into the guts of the vessel. Clearing them out, you locate your target, some sort of nuclear weapon. As you grab its fucking license plate or whatever, the ship is struck from outside, instigating a hasty and rather enjoyably disorienting retreat through the capsizing ship towards evac. This leads to an effective in-game cutscene that you watch from the POV of an overthrown president come POW, being driven through some poorly defined Middle Eastern city during an ongoing bloody coup. It might actually be Mecca, but the maps in the game are super inconsistent, possibly intentionally given the global political climate of the time, and possibly because attention to detail is against company policy over at Infinity Ward. The guy ends up symbolically executed on live television, at the hands of the uprising leader al-Asad, taking orders from fucking by Torres Mendes. The next op is a rescue mission, going after a Russian ultranationalist informant codenamed Nikolai, whom supplied the intel for the cargo ship hit. This entails sneaking up through a Russian village alongside a loyalist unit and clipping Ruskies with your magical fucking blow darts. That is until the game outright forces you into turf warfare, because I guess it detected me getting dangerously close to actually roleplaying an elite special operative. The Russian sergeant keeps stalling the group to provide sniper support to the loyalists below, to the extent that Captain Price takes it on himself to emasculate Nikolai's whereabouts out of him. After sleuthing around with a shitty filter taped to the camera, you grab Nickelodeon and peace out of there. And then you're a US Marine, storming the shores of Vegastan in that way only US Marines can, motivated by justice, camaraderie, and definitely not prosperous natural resources. No, you didn't just turn over 2 pages at once. This is the gimmick that the game uses to advance its narrative, hopping between different groups of appointed good guys in an attempt to flesh out the conflict. Not only does this chokeslam the meager characterization thus far, but it makes the whole thing a thunderous mess both tonally and in terms of pacing. On this side of the game, you play as Sergeant Paul Jackson, the most boring man in the world whose name isn't Soap McTavish, and he leads us proudly into the quintessential COD experience, massacring insurgents in a slum, firing brown guns in brown locations, generally at brown people. The example here involves capturing a news station from which al-Asad appears to be broadcasting, only to find out that it was pre-recorded.
Yeah, score 1 for military intelligence.
And then one of the guys replaces it with a Sean Price song, just to completely shatter the pretense that we're supposed to be taking this shit seriously. Good song though. The Marines' next task is to alleviate a stranded tank crew, codenamed Warpig. Subtle. Hang on to fuck, that's a Black Sabbath song. And the previous mission was called Charlie Don't Surf, in reference to Coppola's Apocalypse Now. You're not making a meaningful statement about war by just pointing to other pieces that do, you fucking clots. That aside, you zero in on the friendly tank. There's a part where you have to skirmish through night vision, and coupled with the Bloody Mary you splash in your face every time you take damage, it's like having Bruce Banner treat your cataracts by trying to beat them into submission. This level is the first to feature COD's slightly intense fascination with military hardware, as you use conveniently placed javelin missiles to pick off enemy armor on an overpass, like disapproving talons of God. Weapons in this category have no use beyond the 30 seconds straight after you pick them up, so one assumes their presence is a bid to maintain the attention of the frenzied NRA demographic. After reaching the tank and holding off a wave of capital city militants, the Marines regroup to discuss the tactical value of some 3-year-old casualties chalk doodle. Back on the set of Faulty Towers, the Black Hawk gets picked out of the sky, stranding the boys in ultra-nationalist farmland. There's a good mix of covert and direct combat as you move from settlement to settlement towards a fortified barn. I'll take the opportunity now to say that the shooting in this FPS is quite good. There's a modest variety of weapons, but more importantly, they're reasonably distinct and allow for different playstyles in most combat scenarios. This is complemented by the arenas being adequately structured in most cases, sufficiently built up and complex, while also large enough to encourage changing position and switching up approaches. This level was among the better ones, with each encounter flowing swiftly into into the next. Though it is the first time you encounter these damned hounds, who are essentially four-legged QTEs, infinitely more threatening than anything else in the game. Also, the Russians are apparently capable of resurrection. I guess we know who picked the right side of the Great Schism. After taking the barn and using the stingers inside to put down the helicopter, you call in an airstrike on a gas station for shits and giggles. The game then jumps abruptly to a view from that same AC-130 to provide air support to the SAS soccer team while some gay couple flirt over comms.
Bet that guy's pissed. It's a nice truck. Nah, he's scared shitless. Nail those guys.
This is a load of time-filling railroaded bollocks. I don't care if it's realistic or whatever. It's boring, ugly, and reduces the player's autonomy to a single button input, cutting down little white dots like Shaq jogging through a field of dandelions. It goes on for nearly 10 minutes too, until Price and Co saunter their way up the asses of a couple of Chinooks and make their escape. Cutting back to John Paul Jackson, the Yankee Doodle dandies move out alongside Warpig to join the push towards al-Asad's palace. This stage also has an air of filler to it, with nothing much of story relevance going on, though at least this one plays to the game's strengths. All you really do is advance a couple of blocks towards an LZ, culling the militia presence of this well-realized Arabic city as you do so, while your pet tank occasionally goes bang bang bang. Shit begins an ascent fanwards, with command radioing in to say that al-Asad's forces have some kind of warhead at the palace, implied to be akin to that aboard the cargo ship. Bojack Manhorse is now sat in a gunner seat en route. This, unsurprisingly, manifests as another on-rails turret segment, though the bar was set so low by that virtual boy shit earlier that I have trouble mustering up much bile. It also helps that it's broken up by a short stint of ground combat, as you go in to extract an advanced team under heavy fire. After a second go at being the god of hellfire, and after learning that the warhead is indeed a nuke, a friendly aircraft goes down nearby. Compelled by hot-blooded patriotism, the Marines touch down to yank the surviving pilot out over a timed sprint. You manage it though and get safely out of range of the palace. Psych. Al-Asad pops the nuke and the chopper goes down hard with all the others. You're treated to a morose little sequence of Jackson dragging himself out into the capital wasteland painfully slowly until he succumbs to the radiation. I'll be honest, this was the one thing I knew about going into the game, and truthfully I was expecting it to be more gruesome, but in and of itself it is an evocative set piece. In the context of the game, however, it's fucking weak. After striking down literal hundreds of infantrymen as if 'twere breadcrumbs off a chicken breast, I'm supposed to feel something when the same thing happens to our gun-wielding camera on legs? That's like interrupting your viewing of Tropic Thunder for an excerpt from Private Fucking Peaceful. You're not even given an explicit declaration that their cause is unjust. You're simply to assume that they speak a spicy language, so they must be up to something. And even if they were openly plotting world domination, this giga suicide bomb concept is fucking ridiculous. In return for raising your own city and therefore most of your own forces, you take out at best a fraction of the US military. That's just bad economics, man. On the next episode of The Price is Right, the SAS boys head to Azerbaijan in search of a safe house that, according to Nikolai's intel, al-Asad fled to before the detonation. You work your way up this hill, house by house, until the sad boy is pinpointed at the summit. While not especially impressive to my mind in terms of layout, this level is the first that I would say offered an actual challenge, though somewhat artificially in necessitating you to traverse open no man's lands to advance. This is past the halfway point, and on fully erect difficulty, I'll remind you. The hardware MacGuffin this time round is a straight up carpet bombing on a cooldown, which sounds insane until you realize that a sniper does the same job faster and with several times the entertainment value. See, this is the issue with modern military shooters. They're too quick to trade gameplay for spectacle and realism. Sure, it might be more true to life to vaporize a bunch of Russians out of nowhere while you lay on the ground spooning your rifle, but it's fucking awful from a game design perspective. So they capture Weird Al and torture him, probably by reading out this game's script, until a poorly timed sext reveals who he reports to. One Imran Zakayev. Price smokes Al and then goes into storytelling grandpa mode, bringing you to the game's one and only flashback mission.
Well,
Goodness me. Americans!
Hello ladies and gents, and thank you very much for watching. This one obviously took a little bit longer than usual because I had to deal with a whole load of college related stuff, but that's mostly out of the way now, so it should be back to business as usual. As you can tell, this two-part format is becoming increasingly common on the channel. So the question I pose to you is, do you prefer the more condensed standalone videos, or would you prefer if I broke them down further into 3 or 4 parts to improve upload frequency? Either way, I hope you enjoyed this particular video. You can follow my Twitter, Instagram, or of course subscribe to the channel if you did. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy your day, guys. Goodbye.